Hello and welcome back to another AP3 video, and in today's video we'll be going over SAT math questions, more specifically linear equations in two variables. We're going to be doing easy, medium, and hard questions on this specific topic that pop up on the SAT math section. So let's start off. Line R in the XY plane has a slope of 4 and passes through the point 0.06, which the equation identifies line R. Okay, so let's analyze the information that's given. I'm given that I have a slope of 4 and a 0.06. So let's analyze the information given. Well, in our graph, 4 is m, so we can say 4 is m, which is slope as well. We're also given 0.6, and because x is 0, this is a y-intercept. Well, how can we figure out if it's a y or an x-intercept? Or how can we figure out to find out the y-intercept? What we can do is plug in A, B, C, and D. We can plug in 0 for each and make sure that we get 0 equals 6. So let's do A and B first. If I plug in 0 for x on A and B, I'm going to get y equals 4. And we're not looking for 4, we're looking for 6, because as we can see here, we have the point 0.06. But if I plug in A and B, I get 0.4. So these two, 0.4. Therefore, A and B are incorrect. Oh, let me plug in C now. So if I plug in, so y equals 4 multiplied by 0 minus 6, y equals, anything multiplied to 0 equals 0. So that's 0 minus 6, which equals minus 6. Therefore, y equals negative 6. But and the question shows y equals positive 6. Let me write that. Therefore, my answer is D. We can also see that as well because we're looking for a slope that has 4. As we can see, slope is m, and m equals 4. So y equals 4, or the slope, that is very wrong. Slope equals 4. So when we look at the answer choices, only D and C shows the slope of 4, but only D shows the y-intercept of 6. Okay, let's do another question. We're given a graph. The table shows 3 values of x and their corresponding values of y. There is a linear relationship between x and y. Which of the following equations represents this relationship? Okay, so before I do anything, I want to understand the graph, right? Because if I understand the graph, I can understand how I look for my answer. So let's analyze it, right? So as I can see, I have the point 0 and 18. As x is increasing, y is decreasing, right? Because when x increases by 1, y decreases to 13 and then 8. So what does that mean? Well, let's look at it. So we have 0 and 18. So let me write that as a point. 0 and 18. Remember, because x is 0, this is again y-intercept. Well, let's look at the second point, 1, 13. Well, 1 and 13. And let's look at 2, 8. 2, 8. There's a little pattern. As x is increasing, y is decreasing. But what I want to look for is look for the common ratio, or look for the ratio on how much y is decreasing when x increases by 1. So we're going to use something called slope formula. So what is slope formula? Well, slope formula is looking for the rate of change, or looking for the rate as which it increases when x increases by 1. So for example, if I have, let's say I have 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, we have a rate of y increasing by 1. In this case, we want to look for the rate of change when x increases by 1, which is obviously decreasing because y is decreasing. So the formula is y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. And x1 and y1 are the smaller values, or x1 is the beginning values, and then y2 or x2 and y2 are the second values. So our x1 is obviously the x value that's smaller, and our x2 value is the value that's greater. It doesn't apply to y because, as we can see here, y decreases. So that rule doesn't apply to the y values, only the x values. So let's see. Let's do 0, 18, and 1, 13. Which one has a bigger x value? 1, 13. Therefore, x1 and 13 are my x2 and y2 values, whether 0, 18 is my x1 and y1 values. So let's plug that into the equation now, or the formula. So that would be 13 minus 18 divided by 1 minus 0. So let's figure out the ratio right now. So that equals negative 5 divided by 1, which equals negative 5, which equals slope. So what does that mean? That means that every time that x increases, x is decreasing by negative 5. So negative 5 is our slope. So what we want to do is analyze all the answer choices and figure out which one gives us a negative 5 slope. And as we can see, A and B has a slope of 18 because here and here has a number of 18 in front of the x. So they're wrong. As we look at C and D have both negative 5, sorry. So both of them have the corresponding slope. But now what I want to look for is what happens when I plug in x. I get the y-intercept of 18 because we stated it over here that when x equals 0, y equals 18. So let me plug in C first. If I plug in x for 0, I'm going to get y equals negative 5 multiplied by 0 plus 13, which ultimately equals y equals positive 13. Well, we need positive 18, not 13. Therefore, my answer is D. But let me fact check that just to make sure. So I would get y equals negative 5 multiplied by 0, which equals positive 18, and anything multiplying to 0 equals 0. So I get y equals positive 18, and that is corresponding to y-intercept in the graph. Therefore, my answer is D. Okay, let's do another question. The equation y equals 0.1x models the relationship between a number of different pieces of music a certain pianist practices. Y during x minute session, How many pieces does the pianist practice if the session lasted 30 minutes? Okay, so I'm given an equation of y equals 0.1x. And it shows the relationship between a different number of pieces of a music a certain pianist practices, y. So y is the amount of pieces practices during x minute practice sessions. And we're looking for how many pieces did the piano practice if the session lasted 30 minutes. So how can I figure out how many pieces did she play in the practice? Well, what I had to do is plug in the value of x, which is how many x minutes she practices, to figure out how many pieces she practiced during the whole session. And we're given that the session lasted roughly 30 minutes, if not 30 minutes at point. So what I want to do is plug in 30 minutes to x because x represents minutes practice, and the minutes that she practiced in this session was 30 minutes. Therefore, I'm going to plug in 30 to x and figure out how many pieces did she play in this practice. So y equals 0.1 multiplied by 30, and that's going to give me my answer. So if I plug in, or if I multiply 0.1 of 30, that equals y equals 3. Therefore, my answer is B. You can plug that into Desmos or your calculator, and you'll get that answer as well. So this question is pretty simple. Just plug in x into the y equation, and you'll get your answer. Okay, this is another question. A total of 2 squares each have side length r. A total of 6 equilateral triangles has a side length t. None of these squares and triangles share a side. The sum of the perimeters of all squares and triangles is 210. Which equation best represents the situation? Okay, so I'm given that we have 2 squares. So let me draw those 2 squares. And I also have 6 equilateral rectangles. So every single length equals the same because it's equilateral. And you can see that because in equilateral, there's a specific portion that says equal. So you can conclude that every single side is equal. So there's 6 triangles. So I'm just going to draw them over here. Right? And every single side length in the square is r. So r is every single side of the squares. And t represents all the side lengths in a triangle. And we're given that none of them share a side, so they're all separate. And we're looking for the perimeter of all of them together, which equals 210. So we're looking for the equation, obviously. Well, let's think about it, right? If r represents all the side lengths in the square, that means all the side lengths in both squares. And then for the equilateral triangles, it's all the side lengths in the triangles. And the side lengths are in the square 4 because it takes 4 side lengths or lengths or lines to make a square. And in a triangle, you need 3 lines. there's 4. In one triangle, there's 3 sides. And in a square, there's 4 sides. So there's 4 side lengths in a square and 3 side lengths in a triangle. So let's figure that out. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. So because I have 4 in one square, and we have 2 squares, I want to multiply 4 times 2 to figure out how many side lengths, which ultimately equals 8. So I have side lengths of 8 are in the square. So now let me do the triangle. If I have 6 triangles, and they all have 3 sides, what I want to do is multiply 3 with 6 to figure out how many side lengths of t there are. So if we do 3 multiplied by 6, that equals 18. Multiplying by t, that equals tr, or 18t side lengths, sorry. So now what we want to do is figure out the perimeter. Well, perimeter is adding, so we would add 8r plus 18r, which equals 210. So 8r plus 18r equals, or 18t, sorry, equals 210. And if we look up all of our answers, that corresponds to C. Okay, let's do another question. The graph shows the relationship between the number of shares of stock from a company A, X, and the number of shares of stock of company B, Y, that Simon can purchase. Which of the equations could represent this relationship? Or which equation could represent this relationship, sorry. Okay, so I'm given that A, or X, represents company A, and Y represents company B, that Simon purchased. And we want to look for the equation that represents the graph shown above. Okay, so I want to analyze one of two things, my x-intercept and y-intercept. And remember, x is when y equals 0, and y is when x equals 0. And if I look at my y-intercept, I see it equals 40. So y equals 40 for y-intercept. If I look at my x, that equals 60. So my x-intercept is x equals 60. So what I want to do is figure out which one of the values, when I plug in 0, I'm going to get 60. And when I plug in 0, I'm going to get 40 for both x and y. Let's do a first. If I do a and I plug in 0 for x, I'm going to get y equals 12. Well, that doesn't correspond to it, so let me cross that out. So let me solve for y in the second equation. I'm going to get 12y equals 480. And if I divide 12 on both sides, I'm going to get y equals 40. So that corresponds to the y-intercept. But let me look for the x-intercept just to be safe. If I plug in 0 for y, I'm going to do it in green. I'm going to get 8x equals 480. Divide by 8, that equals x equals 60. So both have my y and my x-intercept. But I want to plug in for y and c just to make sure. So when I plug in 0 for y and c, I'm going to get y equals 8, which doesn't correspond to the y-intercept in the graph. So C is wrong. And when I solve for y in the second equation, or the last one, sorry, when I plug in 0 for x, I'm going to get 8y equals 480. Divided by 8, that equals y equals 60. This corresponds to our x-intercept, not y-intercept. So this is wrong as well, making our answer B. Okay, let's do another question. This one's a little bit more simple. Line K is defined by y equals 3x plus 15. Line J is perpendicular to line H in the x and y plane. What is the slope of line J? So all we need to do for this type of question, understand what perpendicular lines mean. So what does that mean necessarily? Well, perpendicular lines is if we look at it in a graph, right? So let's say like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. Perpendicular lines is when two lines intersect at one point, but it kind of looks like an X or a plus sign. So if I have a graph that looks like this with one line, the other line is going to look like that, right? It kind of looks like an X or like a plus, depending how you look at it, right? And it intersects at exactly one point because they have different slopes. So why is that important when it comes to this type of question? Well, when we have perpendicular lines, I should be able, when I plug it into Desmos, that those type of lines that I just showed should correlate as well. Well, how does slopes have perpendicular lines? The slopes need to be reciprocal. So for example, if I have a slope of y equals 1/2 plus, or 1/2 x plus 1, the reciprocal is going to be y equals negative 2 plus 16, or negative 2x plus 16. So that's what we need to understand for this example. So in this case, if I have a slope of 3x, or y equals 3x plus 15, I just need to do the reciprocal, or opposite reciprocal, which will be negative 1 divided by 3, making my answer A. So if you understand how perpendicular lines work, your answer would be A. If it told you parallel, it'd be the exact same slope, because they both go up at the same rate of change. Okay, this question might look a little bit tricky, but it's actually pretty simple. Follow my lead. The graph of 7x plus 2y equals negative 31, and the x and y plane has the x-intercept at a0 and y-intercept at 0b, where a and b are constants. What is the value of b divided by a? So maybe rewrite the function or graph. Well, I'm going to give you the equation given. Sorry, I'm stuttering today. We have 7x plus 2y equals negative 31. And I'm given that our x-intercept is a, 0, and my y-intercept of 0, b. And we're looking for the value of a divided by b. Well, because it's set in the x and y variables, it might look a little bit confusing. But all we're doing for this type of question is just plugging in 0 to find the a, or the x-intercept, and then 0 in the x to look for my b, or y-intercept, and then divided by b divided by a to figure out what is the value when I divide b divided by a. So let me look for my x-intercept first. So if I plug in 0 for y, I'm going to get 7x equals negative 31. If I divide by 7 on both sides, I get x equals negative 31. Or x equals negative 31 divided by 7, sorry. Therefore, a equals negative 31 divided by 7. So now what I want to do is look for my y value, or b. So now, oops. So let me do that. So if I solve for b, I'm going to make x equals 0, sorry. And I'm going to get 2y equals negative 31. And if I divide by 2 on both sides, I'm going to get y equals negative 31 divided by 2. And that is my b value. So b equals negative 31 divided by 2. And all I have to do now is just plug in a and b into the b divided by a to look for the value. So b equals negative 31 divided by 2, and a equals negative 31 divided by 7. So this is how the equation kind of looks like. So let me rewrite it. So that would be negative 31 divided by 2, and then divided by negative 31 divided by 7. So this is how it would look like, right? And as we can see, it kind of looks pretty ugly. So in these type of situations, we reverse a. So it would look kind of like this now. Instead of dividing b, it'll be multiplying b by doing the opposite fraction, which would basically be sorry. It'd be negative 7 divided by 31, or negative 7 divided by 31. The 31s cancel out, and I'm left off with negative 1/2 multiplying by negative 7 divided by 1. So the negatives cancel out because two negatives equal positive, and I'm just left with 7 divided by 2, which my answer would be D. Okay, I've seen this question so many times on the SAT. Please don't do this mistake that I'm about to show you guys. The graph of y equals f of x plus 14. Which of the following defines f? Well, I'm given a function over here, right? And we have the y-intercept of 2. And we're given that the graph above equals f of x plus 14. And we're looking for the graph of f. And this is a mistake that people do. So don't do this. Don't do this, right? So you might assume that the graph given is f of x, and we just add 14. So let me do that. If I do that, I'm going to get 16. Therefore, my answer should be B, right? Because all we're doing is just adding 14. Wrong. That's not what we're doing here. Analyze it. We're looking for the original function of f. So f of x. Let me just rewrite that. and the function above is f of x plus 14. So the graph above is already adding 14 to f of x. So what I want to do is that in order to look for the original function of f of x, I am going to have to do y equals f of x of plus 14 and then minus 14 to look for my original function of f. So what I want to do is get the 2, so I'm going to do 2 minus 14 to figure out my original y value or y-intercept of f of x, which equals negative 12. Therefore, I got to look at my answer choices. That gives me the y-intercept of negative 12, and when I add 14, I get positive 2, which would be A. So be careful. Don't add 14. You subtract 14, which equals negative 12. Okay, let's do a harder question now. The table shows two values of x and their corresponding values of y. In the x and y plane, the graph of the linear equation represents this relationship passing through the point 1 divided by 7a. What is the value of a? So we want to look for the value of a when x equals 1 divided by 7. And we got to use the information given to figure it out. Well, I'm given 2 points, negative 18 and then negative 48 and then 752. And as we can see, obviously, the y value is increasing and the x value is increasing. What we want to look for in this type of situation, we want to look for the slope of what is y increasing when x increases by 1, or the rate of change. So we want to use slope formula in order to figure out, like we did in the previous question, the slope. Remember, we just gotta look for x2 and x1 value, and we figure out y2 and 1 value. So x2 is always the biggest x value, and as we can see, 7 is greater than negative 7. So this one would be my x2 and y2 values, and the one on top would be my x1 and y1 values. So let's plug it into the slope formula. So I'm gonna get 52 plus 48 divided by 7 plus 18, because 2 negatives equals a positive, which equals 100 divided by 25, which equals 4, which equals slope. So slope equals 4, and if we plugged it into an equation, I'm going to get y equals 4x. And this is important now, because what I got to look for now is my y-intercept. And why is that important? Well, in order to look for my x value, in order to look for the point of a when x equals 1 divided by 7, I gotta look for my y-intercept so I can plug it in to figure out a. Well, let me use the information given to figure out my y-intercept. If I plug in 7 for x, I'm gonna get y equals 28. Y equals 28, and in this case, when x equals 7, y equals 52. So I can do 52 equals 28. And now I gotta look for my y-intercept, so I can do plus x to figure out that number. If I subtract 28 on both sides, I'm gonna get x equals, and you do a little bit of mental math, you are gonna get ultimately 24. So x equals 24, that'll be my y-intercept. So then plug it into the original equation, I'm gonna get y equals 4x plus 24. And now I'm able to look for my value of a when x equals 1 divided by 7. If I plug that into the function over here, or the equation given, I get y equals 4 divided by 7 and then plus 24. And then what I want to do is do 7 times 24 to get a common denominator. If I do 7 times 24, 14, and then 2 times 7 equals 14, I'm going to get ultimately 154. So y equals 4 divided by 7 plus 100. Oh, I did this incorrectly, sorry. That ultimately equals a different number. 4 times 24, so 24 times 7, that equals 28, and then 14, that equals 168, sorry. So 4 divided by 7 plus 168 divided by 7. That's my fault for doing the wrong math, which equals, if you combine like terms, 172 divided by 7. And if you look at our answer choices, that ultimately equals D. Okay, let me do the last question for today. The graph of 9x minus 10y equals 19 is translated down 4 units in x to the y plane. What is the coordinate of the x-intercept of the graph? So let me rewrite the equation. I have 9x minus 10y equals 19, and it tells me that it translates 4 units down. So 4 units down. So what I can do is just subtract 4 on 19. So if I do minus 4, I'm going to get a new equation of 9x minus 10y equals 15. And that's what happens when you translate 4 units down, or when you subtract 4, and now I just solve for x-intercept. So make y equals 0. So we make 9x minus 10 multiplied by 0 equals 15. Anything multiplying by 0 equals 0. So I'm going to get 9x equals 15. If I divide by 9 on both sides, I'm going to get x equals 15 divided by 9. And they're both divided by 3. So if I divide by 3 on both sides, that equals 5 divided by 3. And ultimately, this is my x-intercept. But let me fact check that really quickly, just to make sure. So if I get Desmos right now, I'm going to do, so let me refresh Desmos. I'm going to do 9x minus 10y, which equals 15. And so I can see I get negative 1.5 and a negative 1.66667. And if I do 5 divided by 3, I'm going to get negative or positive 1 point many sixes and then 7. And then my x-intercept here is 1 point many sixes 7. Therefore, my answer of x is 5 divided by 3. This is the last question for today. Thank you for watching.